Good day or good evening to everyone joining us today. Welcome to MediateGuru South Africa's second webinar on the subject of pet mediation. MediateGuru is a social initiative led by members across the globe. The aim of the organization is to build a bridge via which law students can be encouraged to opt for ADR methods, to ease the load on the judiciary, and to make dispute resolution easier on the pocket. MediateGuru was started with a dream to spread awareness about mediation and to create access to justice through mediation. Today, we have expanded our reach to over 120 countries, with our international family growing every day. It is our pleasure to provide you with these webinars to enhance your learning as a law student, to educate you as legal professionals, and to make mediation understandable to you as a non-professional also. Let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker for today is Karis Nafti. Karis believes that animals are not possessions, nor are they children. They fall into their own unique category that requires a delicate and considered approach when it comes to the issue of custody. For couples who are divorcing and have pets, Karis provides a specialized service offering expert guidance about custody decisions for their dogs, cats, and other household animals. Bringing 25 years of experience as a professional animal behaviorist, she stays in a neutral, supportive position between the separating couple while keeping the animal's perspective at the forefront. Even for couples who are working amicably through their divorce, the emotional component surrounding beloved pets can complicate what is an inevitably difficult time. After getting a comprehensive background history and insight into the animals and the people involved, she guides her clients to find the best solution for their pet's custody. Please leave your questions for our speaker in our chat box during the presentation, and we will get through as many as we can during our Q&A session at the end. Over to our speaker.
Hello, everybody. You're all sitting there as initials on the screen. So if anyone wants to turn their camera on, you must know it makes it so much nicer for the people speaking if we can see you. If you need to stay hidden, I totally understand. But when you're giving your own webinars one day, you'll understand it's much nicer to actually see a face there. So thank you, Lisa. My name is Karis. And I love it when I can see people so people can nod or they can shake their head or, they can make a funny face. So just a little idea. For anyone who wants to, show themselves, it's always appreciated. So I'm going to start by, first of all, thanking you for being here today. And I really want to thank Mediation Guru for having me and for Lisa for inviting me. So I'm here today because Lisa and I started chatting about pets and mediation, and she invited me. So here I am. I'm very happy to be speaking with you today. I am at the moment the sort of pioneering person in the field of pet custody, and you'll understand what that means more as I go into my talk. Lisa mentioned pet mediation, and I have to clarify a little bit that I do mediate any issue around animals and pets, but the bulk of the work that I do is around divorce and pet custody, because that is where I feel people need the most help and the most guidance and the most understanding about who should keep the dog, basically, to put it in the short version. I also do mediations where if there are people who have breeding animals like show dogs and there's an argument over the offspring and who, money issues, I mediate between neighbors if there's a dog that's barking and making too much noise, and kind of everything in between. I started recently doing more horse mediations. As you can hear, you can probably hear, I'm from the United States, but I live in Cape Town in South Africa, and I do my work all over the world. So it's a very fascinating and very interesting profession, and I'm thrilled that you are here to listen to this so it can start to spark some ideas about pet custody and what should happen with a dog in a divorce. This is a very new subject. It's a new topic that's coming out, and I'm sure as the months and years go on, you're going to hear a lot more about this. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat. If you don't have any questions, that's fine. But if something occurs to you, please ask it. Don't be embarrassed to ask questions. It's very helpful as a speaker to know if what I'm saying makes sense or if it's completely confusing or missing the mark or anything. So feel free just to type it into the chat there. So I'm going to start by introducing myself, not introducing, I've just introduced myself. I'm just going to give you a bit of background on how I started to do this work. Now, in this talk, before I get to the background of how I got here, what I want to just let you know on the outset is I'm not here to give you expert legal advice. Okay, I know some of you are students. I know some of you are already mediators. Some of you might be lawyers and a bit of both. I think there's a bit of a range of people listening here today. But I'm not a lawyer. I am a mediator. But this is not about the laws about pets. And I'm not even going to necessarily give you tips on how to be a better mediator. I am here to teach you about animals and specifically dogs. And what I'm trying to provide insight in is not what do the laws say about dogs, but how do dogs themselves experience a divorce? And in turn, how can the owners best help them? And so when you are in the role of a mediator, and specifically a divorce mediator, you can have the right tools to ask the right questions to your clients to help them come to the solution that is the most fair for the animal that's involved. So my background is one in animal behavior and dog training. So since 1996, I have been a professional dog trainer and an animal behaviorist. And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, an animal behaviorist, it's kind of like a combination of being a social worker and a psychologist. So I've been trained in the field of dog behavior, dog psychology, and I, in my career, kind of work with everything from people who want to teach their puppies to wee in the garden, to dogs that are killing other dogs or dogs that are attacking their owners, dogs with anxiety problems, dogs who run away at the park, dogs who chew up the couch, and any problem you can imagine with a dog, I have probably seen it over the years. In my career, I don't know exactly, but I've seen thousands of dogs. And when I say I've seen thousands of dogs, what I really mean is I've seen thousands of families who have dogs. Because the work I do is not just about the dog. No one hands me their animal and walks away. But when someone is having a problem with their animal, I have to get to know the whole family, the whole situation, the whole context of why the dog is running away or having a behavior problem or why it's happening. And so in that role, I work with the people involved and the dogs that are involved. In my dog training world, I've done some really fun things. I train animals to work on movie sets and in plays. So some of you have probably seen the movie Annie, and one of the really cool things I did a few years ago was I trained the dog who played Sandy for the live theater production of Annie that was going on here in Cape Town. So that's a lot of pressure to be live on stage with a dog because anything can go wrong. But I train also dogs for basic training and obedience and security work, but mostly pets and household pets and the fun movie stuff, which is really fun and quirky. So my official title is I'm a certified dog behavior consultant. And this is the highest qualification that someone can have if you're not a vet. So the only sort of higher dog related qualification I could have is to be a vet, which I'm not, but I work very closely with vets in the work that I do. And this is relevant because as you go forward in your work, or as you might already discover, anyone can call themselves a dog expert. Anyone can say, oh, I'm a dog behaviorist or I'm a dog trainer. The truth is it's not a very regulated industry. It's kind of like someone, anyone can say, oh, I'm a coach, I coach people, but you don't have to actually have a qualification to refer to yourself like that. So in your own work, if you come to a point where you do have a custody issue happening with people and dogs, and you need to bring in outside help, make sure it's someone who's actually qualified, because there are very reputable bodies that do regulate people with my job. And you want to make sure you have someone who actually knows what they're doing and not just someone who thinks they do, because there's a lot of people out there who give very questionable advice, let's put it that way. So that's a little bit of my animal background. I grew up in Oregon in the United States, and I've moved to Cape Town in 2005. So since 2005, I've worked in South Africa with pet dogs and all kinds of other animals also. And now the work that I do is very much online. So I do work here in South Africa, and I work in the United States, I work in the UK, in Australia, and all over the place. So I'm going to change tracks now and talk about how I started working and actually specifically in pet custody. Like, what is pet custody? So first of all, if you are new to mediation, or if you haven't worked specifically in divorce mediation or in divorce, let's talk about divorce specifically. When it comes to pets, legally in South Africa, pets are considered property. So that means that pets, from a legal point of view, fall into the same category as a car, as a bank account, as your couch. They are not considered, they're not yet legally viewed as sentient beings. So if a couple is divorcing, and let's say that they've been unable to reach an agreement themselves, and it's gone down the sort of ugly route, and they've ended up in front of a judge who's dividing up their assets. The fact that dogs are considered property means that technically whoever's name is on the purchasing papers or the adoption papers, that person is the legal owner of the dog. So it doesn't matter if, like if my husband and I are getting a divorce, if his name would to be on the paper, legally it's his dog, even if I've taken care of the dog for years, or the dog has clearly been my dog and I'm bonded with it more. A judge would have to award the dog, my husband, ownership of the dog if the fight had gotten that nasty. So the work that I do now is about trying to empower couples or separating couples to make the decision themselves about the dog, because otherwise someone else has to make it for them, which can be really, really heartbreaking. And of course, like you'll discover with children as well, people use dogs as weapons between them when they're separating, like they can with anything valuable. So I started this work because many years ago, I started seeing clients who were calling me as a behaviorist, and they were having behavior problems of varying degrees of complexity. And when I help a dog who's having a behavior problem, I have to figure out why a dog is doing a behavior. So when a dog, for example, is biting people, there are so many reasons why a dog could bite people. It can bite people because it's fearful. It can bite people because it's been abused. It can bite people because it's not getting enough exercise. It's got nothing else to do with itself. It can bite people because it's been taught to bite people. It can bite people because it's scared of ladies wearing big hats. There's a whole lot of reasons. It's not simple enough to say my dog bites. So you have to know, but why? And only when I know the why can I solve the problem and actually work to fix it. So I was seeing behavior problems, and the reason why the dog was having trouble was that during a divorce, the custody decision did not suit the dog involved. So I was having some people who had done a shared custody agreement between the two of them, and the dogs weren't coping with it. I had other clients where the one party got custody and clearly the other party should have gotten custody. And the way that dogs show stress, or they show that they're not coping, is by having what we would, term bad behavior. Because what else is an animal going to do? They don't speak English. So they can only act out with their physicality. So, and these behavior problems I was seeing, this was not in the middle of the divorce. Divorce is always stressful. We can't really get away from that. So it's quite inevitable that around the time of the divorce, the animals are stressed, they're affected, their owners are stressed, the whole house goes a little bit upside down. But the problems I was talking about was like months and years after the fact. And after I'd seen this over and over again, I realized that there was a real need for someone to come into the divorce space who had a background in dog psychology to help people make the right sort of decision. when I grew up, my mom was a divorce mediator. So I grew up in a home where divorce mediation was part of my life. It was part of the conversation. It was how was your day at work? And, you know, my mom would tell me various stories about the kind of work that she was doing. So the art of negotiation and seeing various point of views and not taking sides, and sort of, I grew up in a house where the spirit of just between my parents and I was about, let's figure out what everybody's needs are and come to an agreement that everyone can agree on. So I, with my background just from my childhood with my own mom, I was speaking to her and I said, Mom, like, what happens when people get divorced? What happens with the dog? And she kind of put her hands up like, I don't know. So fast forward, I became a divorce mediator myself. So I'm now an internationally accredited divorce mediator. And I work very specifically just with the animals involved in divorce. I don't do, even though I'm qualified, I don't work with the whole divorce myself. I stay very focused in the niche work that I do. And the work that I do, I always work in tandem with other mediators or a collaborative divorce attorney. Some of the clients I have are, they're not actually married, but they've been in a relationship and they hire me to come and mediate an agreement for them. So that's a little bit of context of the information that I'm going to give you right now. And I do a lot of online teaching courses. So for anyone who, if anyone finds this talk quite exciting, I'll put my website in the thing and you can go, and I'll next, starting in January, I have official certification courses that I offer to people who want to study this in more depth. So let's go on to now the nitty gritty of, what do you do when a couple comes to you with a dog? Who keeps the dog? Where do you even start? So I'm going to touch on a few interesting topics just to get your mind churning, and hopefully you get curious and you get interested, and it makes your brain think. Please don't let this talk be boring. If anyone's getting bored, just say so in the chat. I'll try to make it more fun. Okay. So what makes dogs really lovely? Okay. The best part about dogs is that they are simpler than us. Okay. They are not as complicated as people are. They are very simple little animals. They're predators, and their biggest joy in life is eating, running, chasing after small prey, and sleeping. Honestly, that's kind of what dogs need. And they love attention. They love to be with their family. What dogs are not are children. Okay, dogs are not as complicated. They're not as they're not human children. Okay, now everybody talks about fur kids these days, and I know people love their dogs as much as they can love a child. I am completely cognizant of that fact. However, when that mentality goes into a divorce, this is when I see dogs being terribly affected, because they cannot be treated like children, because they don't have, they're animals, they're not human beings. When you start treating dogs like children, literally, the dogs get too stressed out. They cannot actually handle that kind of obsession that people can have over them, like they would a human child. So a lot of the work that I do is helping people understand that you cannot treat a dog like a child, because it's not fair on the dog. You have to treat a dog like a dog. And that's the kindest thing you can do for them. So loving them too much and giving them too much attention is actually hard on an animal. That's like too much weight for them to carry, too much of your own emotional weight. So what I want to talk about now, there are the three main hurdles, as I call them, in a divorce with a dog. And they are, so if you're taking notes, you can write this down. The three biggest hurdles people have, clients have, are humanizing the dog, weaponizing the dog, and bargaining with the dog. So I'm going to talk first about humanizing. So as I said, people think of their dogs as children, which I understand. And look, I talk to my dogs all the time, and I call them my kids. And I've got human children, but I also have dog children. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're aware of that, it's fun to talk to our dogs and speak to them in that way, but they're not literally the same as a human child. So when people humanize their dog in the context of a divorce, I will often hear things like, well, the dog doesn't want to see you anymore, or Rover doesn't like you anymore, or Rover wants this, Rover only wants to live with me. And there's this way of where people will, rather than say what I want, they will say the dog wants. And they'll put their own emotions and their own desires through their dog's imaginary voice. And that, of course, isn't fair. It's not honest, and it's usually not accurate. Dogs don't hate your ex just because you're getting a divorce. So when you're working with people and there's animals involved, if they're using language like the dog doesn't like you, or the dog doesn't want, when they talk about the dog's wants especially, or likes and dislikes, try to get your clients to sort of reframe their language a little bit to talk about what do they want rather than what does the dog want, to not put it through there. And it just tends to make the conversation a lot like a lot cleaner and a lot less muddled and a lot less confusing when that happens. The second huge hurdle that is probably the biggest problem in divorce with pets, with dogs especially, is that one party will use the dog as a weapon against the other party. And the truth is, nobody knows you as well as your significant other. So when people are divorcing, or their relationship is when they're separating in their relationship, it's very possible that the one party will know that what is most important to the other person is the dog. And if you know that, it's kind of like you got the Achilles heel, or of your ex, and it can become very dangerous. And dangerous in the sense that the threat of losing the dog, if that is hanging over the divorce negotiations, it can actually quietly affect almost everything that's happening in the negotiations. So my advice to people, to mediators, when there is a dog involved, is that as you're going through things, try to address the dog as soon as possible during the mediation. Don't leave it till the very end. And the reason you should get it out of the way as soon as possible is that then it doesn't become, I have seen with many of my clients where if the dog is the most important thing, they'll capitulate too much, they'll give up too much, they'll kind of want to offer their heart and their soul as long as they can keep the dog, and they won't be necessarily fair in what they're prepared to offer. So if you can work through that very much sooner in the process, first of all, it tends to give people a good sense of kind of achievement, like, okay, the mediation can work. I think a lot of people in mediation they're skeptical. It's like, well, we're never going to agree, so we should just give this up, or or we'll try this, but we're going to have to get lawyers, all that sort of talk and conversation. So getting through something challenging like the pet, like the dog especially, can be very helpful, but it also stops the one person from feeling vulnerable. Of course, look, you will find, as I'm speaking now, especially to those of you who are students, you will find in mediation that often one partner has for example, the power of the money or the intellectual power in the conversation. There's different ways that people wield power over each other. And for my purposes, because my focus is trying to help the dogs end up in the right home, I want to take the dog out of a power dynamic. Because if a dog is involved in the power dynamic, then the conversation is not actually about the dog. The conversation is about a win and a lose between the couple, okay, or the separating couple. So the third hurdle that often comes up is bargaining. And I will hear things like, okay, you can keep the dog, but I want the car, or I want the bucky, you can have the dog, or the bank account, or a portion of the bank account. Now, bargaining, I say it's a hurdle, but it isn't always a bad thing. And the reason that bargaining isn't always a bad thing is if it's very, very much out in the open and part of the conversation, then use it and go with it. Because if one party is prepared to give up the dog for some other item, they're probably not the right person to end up with custody of that dog. So it can be a useful, like a useful stream to go down, but you need to make sure that what is being offered in exchange for the dog is fair. And what I mean, I have a good story of that is was involved with a couple. I'll call them Bob and Sally, and they had one dog between them. It was really important for Sally that she kept custody of the dog, and the dog, from my point of view, very much belonged with her. But Bob knew this, and was being, by the time I was involved in the conversation, the mediation had been dragging on. It wasn't going very successfully. So Sally was prepared to give up her late father's vintage record collection in exchange for keeping the dog. And we went into a caucus, and I discussed this with her, and I said, I just kind of had a little bit of a reality check. And I said, Sally, your father has passed away. This is the most treasured inheritance you have from him, was his vintage record collection, which you grew up listening to. And I was like, are you really prepared to give that up for the dog? I know the dog is so important, but you've got to think of your whole life and how you might feel about that after. She offered that because she knew Bob, that was the one thing that Bob also wanted, and was to give the dog up for. So luckily, we worked through that, and he got some other art and some other things in the house, and Sally did keep custody of the dog, which again, from my point of view, in that situation was totally appropriate. So I'm just using that as an example that the bargaining is good, but make sure that that you need to do what you can, that someone is not giving up something that they'll really regret later, because that can be quite a hard pill to swallow. So again, the three things to be mindful of, and they're inevitable. So it's not like you can have a mediation where these factors don't happen, but you just need to be kind of aware of it so you can work with it. So we've got humanizing, weaponizing, and bargaining. And in my work, I want the dog to end up in the right home. So I'm a neutral, I'm a mediator, like a neutral mediator between the two people, but I will share my experience and my point of view about, as a dog behaviorist, what is the most fair situation on the dog, because that's my main focus, is that the dog ends up in the right place. Okay, so when you are now, I'm going to now give you a list of questions that you can keep keep in your back pocket, to when you do have people approach you with a dog. Mediators say, well, I don't even know where to start. Like, what do you say? Who's got the biggest backyard? Like, okay, well, you should keep the dog because you've got a big backyard. That's not the case at all. So first of all, as a little aside, having a yard is important, but it is not the be-all end-all for a dog, because dogs do not exercise themselves in the backyard. Dogs don't run around until they're tired and stay peaceful. They do need a yard, but depending on how active the dog is, what's important is that the dog's getting enough exercise, and dogs don't exercise themselves. When dogs exercise themselves, then it's something you don't want. Exercising themselves means they dig up the garden, or they bark at the trees, or they try to climb out of the garden, they try to escape from the garden. That's a dog exercising itself. So a dog that needs a lot of exercise needs to come from the humans involved, they can't just do it on their own. So questions that you can ask your clients to start to get good conversation or good thoughts happening about the dogs are, first of all, how old is the dog? So if a dog is 1 year old or 10 years old, then dogs need to be very different. What sort of breed is this dog? And that is important because different breeds are very different. A Yorkshire Terrier is not the same as a Boer Bull, and it's not the same as a Husky, and it's not the same as a rescue dog who's scared of thunder. They're very, very, very different. Dogs are so varied in their expressions that you have to know, get a little bit of tell me about this dog. And if it is a purebred dog, then it's helpful to ask, oh, sorry, I'm distracted by the chat. Okay, I can't look at that. I'll come back to the chat now. It's helpful to ask, what was this dog bred for? So if it's a dog that was bred to be active all day, then that's important to know. Or is it the dog that was just bred to sit and look out the window, which don't really exist, but people think they do? Then that's also helpful. So another question to ask is, how well does this dog cope with change? So if you've moved before, how does the dog handle it? Oh, I have to open the door for my cat. Don't go anywhere. Give me 1 second, everybody. Well, that was terribly unprofessional, but it's important because my cat was stuck outside. Sorry. Okay. How well does dog cope with change? So when you've moved, what's happened? If you've got a roommate, how has that been? If you had a child, what happened with the dog then? Another question to ask is, does this dog enjoy strangers? Like, is it scared of strangers that come to your house? Does it run away and hide? Does it want to say hello? Does it try to, does it enjoy strangers or not? And then how much exercise is the dog used to? Okay, now, let me put it this way. A lot of people don't exercise their dogs enough. It's a sort of a plague on dogs in general, that people buy very, very active dogs, and then they don't give them enough exercise. And what's important to understand about dogs is that dogs cannot change the amount of energy that they're born with. So it doesn't matter how well trained a dog is. If it is not getting enough exercise, it will not be well behaved. So if there's a dog that is destroying the house, the reason almost always that a dog is destroying the house is because it's not getting enough exercise. Dogs, when they are bored, have 4 options available to them. Okay, they can chew on something, they can dig something, they can bark, and they can run. That's it. What else are they going to do if they're bored? Running, barking, digging, and chewing. So anytime a dog is engaging in those questions and in those behaviors excessively, the simplest answer is almost always the correct one, which is normally the dog is not getting enough exercise. So, and when it comes to pet custody, just to bring it back to that, if you have a dog that is used to a 5K run 4 times a week, it will need a 5K run 4 times a week. It doesn't matter if someone loves the dog more. And with a dog like that, it would be better to go to a home where, even if, like, let's say party A is the person who runs the dog, but party A is moving to a flat. Party B is moving to a house with a big yard, but party B doesn't have time to run the dog. That dog should go to the house where it's going to be exercised, not necessarily with the big yard, if it's an active breed and if it's used to that. Okay. And the main thing, what I also just try to tell people, and it's important for you to know because it'll come up, or it'll happen with you, it'll happen with your friends, is what I said earlier about dogs being simpler than we give them credit for. When dogs chew up something or destroy something, they are not sending you a message. They're not intentionally hurting something of value. And I can explain that in this way, that first of all, dogs don't have a sense of value. They don't have a sense of money. They don't have a sense that something is special because we paid a lot of money for it or because we use it all the time. Equally, because they don't have a sense of value, if my dog chews up my cell phone, let's say, it's too far of a leap to imagine that my dog is chewing up my cell phone because the dog knows the phone is valuable, and by destroying it, I can't use it, and then the dog is somehow getting revenge on me. If you break down the concept of dogs trying to get back at their owners, it actually makes no sense at all. It's not possible because they're animals. The reason why dogs chew on things is that they are stressed or bored or frustrated. When dogs are stressed or bored or frustrated, they especially like to chew on things that smell like the people they love the most, which means your dog will like to chew on your favorite shoes, for example, because they smell like you the most. They will want to chew on the remote to the TV because you hold it all the time. They'll want to chew your glasses because they smell like your face. Not because they're picking your favorite item to destroy. It's actually ironically a sign of love, even though we don't perceive it that way because we have to replace our glasses. I have to close my door again. Hold on. Windy Cape Town. You guys who are in Cape Town understand the pain of the wind in the doors. Okay, so that was a little divergent, but I like to get that message out to as many people as I can, because especially people think, oh, the dog's guilty, and look, the dog's guilty and upset. And the dogs are never guilty, they are scared. Anytime someone says, oh, look, this dog is feeling guilty, it's not. They're not capable of guilt, but they're certainly capable of fear. And if you're angry at your dog, that's all they can do, is show you that they're scared of you and they're submissive. Okay, that's my little tangent soapbox, but it's important. Okay, so back to the questions now. I'm just going to rewind, and then I will get to your questions in the chat. So please keep asking questions, guys. Another question to ask is this dog a rescue, and is there a lot of trauma in its past? Okay, so being a rescue dog is a very vague term. Okay, and there's a lot of people who are very proud of the fact that they have rescue dogs, and they love to tell everybody that this dog is a rescue. But a rescue dog can mean a lot of different things. Okay, a rescue could be a dog that was born in a shelter where mom had enough food, and yes, it was a shelter, but everything was fine, and you know, it had a sweet interaction with all the people that it met, and then it was adopted. So that dog could be a rescue, but a dog that was born in a shelter where everything was fine and mom had enough food is not likely to be a very traumatized soul. Whereas if you have a rescue dog that has spent many months or many years in a very difficult situation, or it has been abused and it's grown up in an abusive home, if when mom was pregnant, mom didn't have enough food herself, so if, in other words, you see all these poor dogs where the mama dog is half starved, what happens then is those puppies are actually born feeling scared and anxious because the hormones, the mother's adrenaline hormones kind of coursing through her body as she's pregnant will affect those dogs. And so those puppies are likely to be affected by that their whole life. So a rescue dog can be a sweet puppy that you adopted, which is lovely, or it can be a dog who suffered a lot of abuse. And so if you have a dog who has had a lot of abuse in its background, a dog like that will be less likely to cope with shared custody and the two people fighting. Okay, let's not mince words about it. When people get divorced, they get ugly. Some people get so very, even if it's not a violent household, just the fights or the tears or the stress. If you have a dog who's had a lot of trauma in its past, that dog will be much more affected by emotional people than a dog who hasn't had any abuse. But dogs who have been abused, kind of like people, if they are around human beings who are upset, the dog will get scared. They will worry, oh gosh, am I going to be on the receiving end of that emotion? And it can be a very stressful thing for them. So I'll go into more detail of that if I've got time. We'll see how we go. Okay. Then it's important to ask, has this dog had any behavioral issues? So for example, has it had separation anxiety? Have you had to get professional help with the dog? Is everything okay with it? And then you need to ask about medical problems or anything medical going on with the dog. A lot of dog breeds are very prone to having all kinds of genetic problems. Okay, bad hips, bad skin, bad ears. A lot of breeds have chronic ear infections in their ear, like Cocker Spaniels who've got big, heavy, hairy ears. They often have yeast infections that are very hard to get rid of. Dachshunds, sausage dogs, sometimes can get slip discs in their back. French bulldogs and bulldogs have breathing problems, all kinds of things. So it's important to bring these questions out between the two people so that hopefully they, even if party A says, well, I'm keeping Rover, and then it's like, oh, hang on, but Rover's got this medical problem and this and this and this, it can kind of maybe change the dialogue a little bit. So those are just some very basic questions to think about to hopefully getting your clients to make the right decision themselves. So as you'll find out in your mediation studies, or you already know, that the kind of skill of being a good mediator is just to create the space that the people find the right solutions for themselves. So those questions can help facilitate that to open it up for people. Okay, let me go on to my next thing. Okay, so I want to answer the questions. Okay, I'm going to take a pause from my from what I'm writing, what I've written down here, and I'm just going to go through some of the questions, and then I'm going to go back to what I've said, what I've got in my notes. So hold on one second. Okay, so the first question I've got is, has your mediation style changed due to COVID? Are you able to gather as much behavioral intel online? So it's fascinating. So when lockdown first started, I started doing just normal behavior sessions online, and I can absolutely do behavior consultations online. So for me, all I need from people is a video of their house and a little bit of a video of the dog. But in terms of pets specifically, I don't actually need to meet the dog, which I know sounds really strange, but it's much more about a dialogue between the two people. And the reason I don't need to meet the dog is for this reason. If you can imagine, let's imagine that horrible moment where party A and party B are in the room and they've brought Rover. And in an hour session, even at their house, all that will happen is party A and party B are both trying to show me that Rover loves them the most. And so I've done this with people, and they'll bring treats, or they'll call the dog, no, look, he's coming to me, look, no, look, he's coming to me. And in that little pocket of a session, I can't actually figure out that little window. Seeing the dog in person is not going to give me much extra information about where the dog should go. What is more relevant is the history of the dog, which I can just get from the people, and then what the possibilities of life look like going forward. So for me, just for mediation, but also for behavior consultations, the Zooms actually work just fine, which I know probably sounds a bit strange, but yeah, it's quite amazing. And I think because I have the experience I do have with dogs, just having worked with them for so many years, I can do it. I don't know if someone was very new to behavior work, they might need to be there a little bit more in person. But I think once you have enough experience, you can absolutely do it online. Okay, then I've got a question. What if the dog is not active, becomes lazy, then what to do? So, I mean, that's obviously a separate question, but the first thing I would do is take it to a vet, because if the dog's energy level suddenly changes, it either might need to change its food, it might be sick, or if it's generally not an active dog in general, that's also a possibility. But the first thing is, if there's a heavy change in behavior, especially becoming lethargic, is take the dog to the vet. And if the dog said that, if the vet, take the dog to the vet. If the vet says the dog physically is fine and the food is okay, and you need to get the dog in shape, you just have to do it like a person who's out of shape, and do it slowly. So little walks, get the dog moving again a little bit. Okay. And that's correct. Yeah. So dogs can't change the amount of energy they're born with. That's right, Lisa. Okay. Good evening, ma'am. I have a question. Would you think? Okay. So here's a nice, beautiful question about, yes, I do think some laws need to change about pets and laws. But it's been in the works for a long time, and I don't know when it will actually be finished, because there's so many different laws just about dogs barking. There's different rules about what constitutes a good breeder. Some people want to ban breeds like pit bulls. Some people want to just have pit bull breeds regulated. So yes is the short answer, but I don't know what that answer is. I'll put it that way. Okay, and let's see if that's okay. That's the last question. Okay, I'm going to go back to my notes now, but please, guys, if you do have any questions, just pop it through on the chat. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a very tricky question, which is the question of shared custody. Now, you may have heard of this. You may be rolling your eyes, but either way, shared custody with dogs is a huge thing. And it's very, very common in the States and in the UK and other countries, and it's becoming very popular here in South Africa as well. And shared custody is just that. It is neither party wants to, say goodbye to the dog. So 1 week with party A, 1 week with party B, or the dog goes with the ex every second weekend. And if I go back to what I first touched on in my first point, which is about dogs are not children, it's very relevant here with the conversation around shared custody. And if I can think of, if there's kind of one point I really hope my work gets across, it's this point. And that is that shared custody should not be considered a default for all dogs. It should not be considered a default. The question you have to ask is, can the dog tolerate shared custody? because it's very much a human kind of dreamy ideal that the dog never has to say goodbye to either owner. Can the dog tolerate that kind of lifestyle? If they can, then you can do shared custody. If not, it really isn't fair on the dogs. Now, what I'm going to talk now in the last few minutes is when is a dog a good candidate for shared custody and when is it not? Okay, so the first thing is if people have human children. Okay, so if you're dealing with a family with human children, generally, and now I'm not making a blanket statement, I'm just take me with a pinch of salt, but generally, if there are human children, this is my experience, the dogs are not as heated of a topic because the children kind of carry that emotional weight that childless couples will give to the dog. So it's not usually as much of a hot issue. It isn't usually doesn't always create as much of a fight. It can. I mean, there's some very antagonistic couples, but again, it's a general statement. So if you have a couple, and I mean, obviously as mediators, you are not going to be getting hugely antagonistic couples coming your way. They'll give up on mediation and they'll go for lawyers. So speaking to you as mediators and future mediators, let's assume for this next bit of the conversation that the couple is willing to work on solutions that work for everybody. For those couples with children involved, very often what families want to do, or the idea is that the dog should move with the children. And that often is actually does work very well, because what happens is the kids become the steady factor in the divorce situation. And they kind of get to follow the kids along. And of course, the kids often love having, the dog also for them becomes a steady factor and they can move with it. So if the couple proposes that, and if both of the homes are suitable, then it is a good idea. You still have to go back to the main issue for a lot of dogs, which is their need for sufficient exercise. I had one family a while ago, and they had 3 kids and an Alsatian. And they actually got my help long after their divorce. And this was a party A and party B were very amicable. They were divorced, but it wasn't a ugly divorce situation. And when they got divorced, the dad moved out, mom kept the house, and she had primary custody of the kids. The Alsatian started chewing up the furniture about a month or so after the divorce happened. And they thought, oh, she's stressed and it's been hard on the dog. But the chewing continued. So they got my help in, not as a divorce mediator, but just to help with the dog chewing on the furniture. And what I discovered in working with this family is that the dad used to be the one who took the dog for a run every day. And now, of course, he moved out. He didn't. And the mom loved the dog very much. She was a lovely lady, but she was like basically now a single mom to 3 kids. She didn't have time. She would have loved to, but she didn't have time to take the Alsatian out for a run every day. And I said to them, I said, look, it's more likely that the reason this dog is chewing up the furniture is not because she's sad that dad is gone, but she's bored and she's frustrated, like I said at the beginning of the talk. So we spoke I worked with both of them, and I said, listen, why don't we try letting the dog go and live with dad for 3 months, and let's see what happens. And dad lived in a much smaller place. He had a very small yard, and he worked, he had a normal office job, but he got up every morning and he took the dog for a run, and the dog was so happy. So for that particular family, it worked that the dad had full custody of the dog, and the kids were there, and the kids saw her every time and they loved her. So that's a situation where, despite the dog's love for the whole family, the most important thing for her was her run every day. That's actually what she needed more than anything. So that ended up going there. So in terms of shared custody, it's most likely to be successful if the dog is a very easygoing dog, not a very anxious soul, not a dog with a lot of trauma in its past, but just a very happy, cool, chilled out, friendly sort of dog. It's really important that the 2 people involved, the humans involved, will be able to do the handover peacefully between the dog, because I have found in my experience that some people are obsessed about doing shared custody, not because of the dog, but because they still want to see the ex. They're not actually ready to say goodbye to their ex. So the dog's kind of this strange excuse to stay connected, when otherwise it'd be like a clean break. I did work with one couple where they were aware that they were going to fight if they saw each other, but they really wanted to try to make shared custody work. And what we arranged for them is that there was a dog walker that would do the handoff. And they had the money to do it. And it seemed like I said, here's a solution. Let's hire a dog walker and that will be the neutral person who takes the dog. And it worked for them. And then everything was fine. So it's always good to be creative, because who knows, anything can work. Shared custody is also a better indication if the dog is younger and confident. Okay, it's not fair to do it if a dog's like 10 or 11 years old. I mean, again, I'm generalizing, but picture sort of a 2-year-old dog is going to adjust to that easier than an older dog. And like I said, if there's children involved, that the dog can move with the kids, that's a good thing to do. And if you have a sort of a breed that's very easygoing, so generally something like a Yorkie can struggle more with stressful situations. So smaller dogs that are physically smaller generally don't handle stress as well. Again, this is a general statement, it's not a factual statement, but the world impacts them a little bit harsher because they're just not very big and robust and able to handle stuff. So very easygoing, very confident breeds, very chilled out sort of dogs, those are the best. And there's so much more detail to it, but I just want to give you kind of an overview to just plant some little seeds in your brain. But as a general overview, that's kind of when shared custody can work well. Shared custody is really not advisable. First of all, if a dog is old, if it's an elderly dog, it's just not fair on the poor dog. Now, the hard part is, of course, that if there's a couple who've been together for 12 years and the dog is 11 years old and the dog has sort of been with them both during the whole relationship, I know for the people, it will be harder to say goodbye to the dog, especially because of what the dog represents in terms of the relationship. But from the dog's point of view, it's a really harsh thing to do. And if a dog is sick, or if it's just physically not very well, and if it's weak, it's a hard thing to ask a dog like that to transition. And to go back to what I said earlier, if the people are not friendly with each other, and from the dog's point of view, what happens is that if this handoff happens between the two parties, and every time it happens, it's either a fight or the people are apologizing to the dog or to each other or whatever it is, what happens is that the dog is then in a life situation where it chronically thinks something is wrong and something terrible is happening, and he doesn't know why, and they won't have a context for it. The dog will just know. It's like, if I can put it simply, dogs know, well, either my person is peaceful or my person is not peaceful. And what you want there, sorry, okay, my dog's chasing a dog. And so in a situation where the human beings around a dog are in a very stressed kind of fighting situation, the dogs find that hugely stressful. Okay, I have a friend who came to say hi. And this is Bear, everybody. This is I'm allowed to do this because I'm a pet expert. Okay, so that's, say hello to the little poodle. So if the people are going to be fighting and antagonistic toward each other, again, it's really not fair on the dog. Also, if there's a tendency to sort of, sometimes you get party A and party B, and they want to apologize to the dog or overfeed the dog, or make up for the time they're with the horrible ex, and that also is not fair on the dogs, okay? Because it's not fair for the dogs to carry all that emotional weight. As I said, rescue dogs who've either had a lot of different owners or a lot of abuse in their background, it's not fair on them. And interestingly, and again, I go into a lot more detail to this in the course that I offer, but as a general overview, breeds that were bred to be guarding breeds or livestock dogs or herding dogs tend to struggle more with shared custody. So by those kind of dogs, I mean Alsatians, Rottweilers, Border Collies, Belgian Malinois, Dobermans. These dogs are bred to become very attached to a specific property. So for them to move between different properties is very tricky. It really throws them in a very, it goes against their nature. They're bred to be as in love with their property as they are with the people who live there. So again, there's always exceptions, but it's less advisable for those particular sort of breeds. And I mean, a helpful question that I'll just, that I'll end off here with quickly is, if you're at a point with your clients where, you know, the conversation is calm and it's not too hot, ask them, what do you think your dog would say if they could speak for themselves? Now, you can't ask this if someone's in the middle of humanizing their dog and saying, the rover hates you, but if they're actually peaceful, if they could sort of take a deep breath and say, what do you actually think the dog would want? That's a really important question. And someone's asking that, pardon me, what kind of pets do you have? So I have 4 dogs and 3 cats. I have a poodle, I have a black Russian terrier, I have a border collie, a cattle dog, and I have 3 rescue cats. So if you want to, you can follow me on Instagram and see all my pets. I put them up there all the time. I'm one of those nerdy animal people. Okay, and then the very last thing that I want to say, because this is really, really important, and then I will give you some information about the course that I do. This is really important, so everybody listen, don't leave. I want to talk about visitation. Okay. One thing that people often ask in a divorce context, say, oh, can I just come? I just want to have permission to come and visit the dog. So, okay, let's say I've got custody but my ex just wants to come and visit the dog. Visitation is probably the most stressful thing you can do to a dog in a divorce situation, because just when they're settled and they're happy with the person that they're living with, then this other person who's been the other love of their life comes and then leaves again and disappears out of their life. So if there is a visitation, it needs to be regular, like say every Tuesday, for example, but random visits are, and this might sound like a harsh word, but in my opinion, random visits are almost cruel to the dog. They don't have a context. They don't know what's happening. They don't know why this person has disappeared and reappeared. So don't suggest visitation in order to make people feel better. It's like if party A is getting custody, don't suggest, well, maybe party B can just come and visit. Don't do that, not to the dog. Party B can ask for videos, you know, that kind of proof that the dog is okay. But visitation in general is harder on the dog. Dogs can say goodbye, but the visitations are confusing for them. So I'm happy to open up for more questions now, but for anyone who joined late, I offer, and my next one is starting in January, on the 18th of January, I offer a 3-part, 5-hour course that goes into pet custody in detail for mediators and judges and attorneys. So I'm going to put my website here in the chat, but it's whokeepsthedog.com. And there's a link there, and you can send me an email to apply for the course. I'm putting in the chat now. And yeah, and that's, or email me if you have questions. Please feel free to be in touch. You can send me an email. There's a lot of articles on there that I've written about signs of stress in dogs. There's a lot of podcasts I've done and interviews and things. So anyone who wants more information, please have a look at the website. And other than that, if anyone has any more questions, please type it now. Oh, and there's my email. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, you're welcome, guys, to email me. Absolutely. But thank you so much for the engagement on the chats and the questions. And I do this work because I love helping the dogs and the animals. So please don't be shy to get in touch. You can ask me a question. Feel free to reach out. And other than that, oh, new messages. What's it? Oh, a heart. Oh, thanks. Lisa, I think that's us. Is there anything else that needs to be said? I think that's it.
Yeah, I think if anyone wants to jump in, who joined in late, feel free to do so. Yeah. I just want to add one thing that jumped out at me is that one thing that I've always been against, especially having a litigation background, was when children are weaponized, you know, in the divorce. And I find myself like even forgetting about the adults issues and just wanting to sort of protect the children. And I know we have the Family Advocates Office here in South Africa, who intervene in divorce cases, but it's just, that seems to be all there is when it comes to human babies. But it's so important when it comes to pets who actually can't say anything, to know that they're not supposed to be humanized, weaponized, and a bargaining tool. And I think once we get more protection in terms of the law, when they do become recognized as sentient beings, then I think that will really hit home. Because for now, it's a bit hard to people to understand, because the law treats them as objects, as possessions.
Yeah.
To tell people don't humanize, don't weaponize, and don't bargain with them, it's a bit of a disconnect, because uh, the law treats them as possessions. So I think
Yeah.
it's very important that we drive that sort of mantra, that because I'm a pet lover myself,
Yeah.
and so
Well,
I
and
wouldn't
what's
want.
interesting, Lisa, is in the States, the laws are changing. So there's about
Mm,
4 states in America where laws now, the best interest of the pets is now the law in divorce proceedings. So I think hopefully now as it tips, as the laws, as often happens, it sort of happens first in America, and maybe it's going to start trickling down around the rest of the world, that the laws are actually changing to um, to recognize dogs' needs and not see them as property. So yeah, so I'm hoping that it will trickle down. And someone here's got 9 dogs. Oh, that's great. That's super, Desiree. That's awesome. So yeah, it's a growing topic, and not a growing topic, but there's just more awareness about it now. So watch this space, it will come. So anyway, I really hope that everybody comes and joins my course or emails me and says hi, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you so much, Karis.
Thanks,
I
Lisa.
think
Thanks for having me.
I
Thank you
think
all.
everyone, including myself, were quite piqued at the topic. And when I first came across you on LinkedIn, I was quite amused. We had some animated exchanges
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of it. And yeah, I think dogs everywhere are grateful
Let's
for
hope. Let's hope. Let's hope.
and
Great, guys.
hopefully through the courses that you can raise up
Yeah.
more people like yourself, even better than yourself, and who can
Yeah.
really speak for pets and really bust all of the myths, and really treat them as they're supposed to be treated. And
Yeah.
I think we can coexist, in a better way. I think as pet lovers, as you said, we tend to humanize the dogs, and that can have the adverse effect. So I think even training like this can help even non-professionals as well. Just know how to
Absolutely.
better understand their pets, and treat, have a more harmonious relationship with their pets. So thank you for. I think everyone has enjoyed it from what I can see on the chat.
Good. Good. I hope
Yeah,
so. Okay.
yeah.
Lovely.
So
Okay.
um,
Awesome, guys.
yeah,
Well,
so I'm
let's
just
all
gonna.
stay, yeah, we'll stay in touch hopefully. And I look forward to being in touch with more of you.
Yeah, so thank you to our speaker for giving her time and sharing her expertise. And thank you to everyone who attended today. Please complete the feedback form. We'll post a link in the chat just now to receive your signed e-certificates. And we're still looking for campus ambassadors here in South Africa for MediateGuru. So you can contact me via email at mediategurusouthafrica@gmail.com, or visit mediateguru.com to sign up. Just a couple of announcements. On the 11th to the 12th of December, Media Guru hosts the international conference on emerging trends in ADR, and the themes will be on the massive shift to online ADR, the demand for family mediation, the rise of AI, artificial intelligence in ADR, and new mediation arbitration designation and guidelines. In March of next year also, we host our second annual virtual international mediation competition. It's open to students from all over the world, part-time and full-time law students. Participants will conduct role plays that have been designed by international mediation experts, and um, registration closes on the 13th of March next year. So um, as I said, you can fill in the feedback form that's going to be provided in the chat box. The link will be there. And we look forward to hosting you at our next webinar. Goodbye, everyone.